cough drops, mouthwash, and tea. Is there a scientific way to stay cooler when you run? Hello, fellow geeks, and welcome back to Running Geek Girl. My name is Heather, and I am glad you are here today. Now, as I'm sure you're well aware, it is currently summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and the heat is absolutely sweltering, which means that for a lot of people, working out outside is getting a little more difficult. So you do have the option of moving indoors to the treadmill or to a gym, but for those who do not have the option, you just kind of have to put up with the heat outside. But is there a way that you can actually make yourself cooler, or at least make you think that you're a little bit cooler while out on a run? A wonderful subscriber of mine sent me a link to an article which actually had an experiment dealing with this exact scenario. So let's take a look at some of the science behind it, and for that we'll turn it over to Science Geek Girl. Thank you, Heather. Now, we're going to be taking a look at an experiment that was conducted by Martin Barwood of Leeds University, in which he was trying to find ways to make athletes cooler while they were working out under hot conditions. And so for that, he turned to menthol. Now, menthol is a natural chemical that is found in peppermint oil, or it can be synthesized commercially in a lab. It reduces how hot we feel by activating specialized receptors in our skin cells and in the mucous membranes in our mouth. Now, these receptors pick up subtle changes in the temperature of the outside world, and they send a message to our brain to tell it whether we should be feeling hot or cold. Now, for reasons we can't quite understand, menthol turns on the cold-related version of the receptors, which alerts our brain that the world is not as hot as our brains had been thinking, and so we should start feeling cooler. So he had athletes use different types of menthol in various forms to keep their cool during hot weather training and in competitions. Now, in his 2020 study, he gave athletes different drinks with menthol in them and had them either drink or rinse their mouth with them. And all of those athletes reported feeling much less hot and finished their races faster than the athletes who were not using menthol. His conclusion is that menthol can help you feel more comfortable during a hot workout. So now that we know a little bit more about the science behind it, let's test some of these methods out for ourselves. Okay, so today we are going to be experimenting with this right here. You may remember this from when you were younger. Maybe your parents used this on you when you had a cold. It is Vapo Rub. So this is a eucalyptus oil and menthol rub that you would usually put on your chest or under your nose in order to help you breathe a little bit better when you were all stuffed up. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to be rubbing a little bit here on my chest and see if any of the cooling properties of the menthol and eucalyptus actually help after running for 1 mile. So here we are, just gonna rub that in. Very oily, what can I say? All right, so we have a nice layer of menthol and eucalyptus going here. Let's run for 1 mile, come back and see how we feel. So after running 1 mile smelling like a cough drop, here's what I found. After the Vapo Rub sinks in, you do get a little bit of a tingling sensation, which if you concentrate really hard, can make you fool yourself into thinking that you're a little bit cooler. It especially helps if you get a bit of a breeze like we've got today, because anytime that breeze hits, then it kind of amplifies that cooling effect. But I have an idea for a couple of other places to put it. As we wrap up this mile, I'm going to loop back around. I'm going to try putting a little bit on my face and on the back of my neck to see if that has any further effect. So let's loop back around and give it a shot. So here we go. I'm going to put a little bit here, under the nose, and on the back of the neck. Let's rub that in. I smell even more like a cough drop. Definitely feeling that tingle. Let's see if that translates to me feeling any cooler on another mile. of mile 2. The Vapo Rub on my face lasted about, I'd say 7 or 8 minutes with the tingling, and then you stop noticing it. Worked a little bit better on the back of my neck, especially since I'm getting some breeze, so that helps reactivate the stuff that's on my face, but I definitely am still feeling it a little bit on the back of my neck. So, I'm gonna loop around one more time. I'm gonna try one more experiment. We're gonna see how it does if I put it on my legs. Here we go. So let's put a layer on my legs and see how this does for the next mile. Okay, so as we're cooling down, let's talk about how that last mile went. With the Vapo Rub on my legs, I will say very refreshing. Whether it was cooling, I don't know. I think I could definitely trick my mind into thinking that I was cooler just from the tingle on my legs, especially when the wind kicked up while I was running. That felt incredible. So overall, if you put it on your chest or your legs or something like that, it does take it a few minutes to sink in, and that's just because the skin is thicker there as opposed to on your face where you feel the tingle almost immediately. If you're gonna put it on your face, make sure you watch where you're wiping sweat off so that you don't get the Vapo Rub into your eyes. Overall, most of what I used only lasted maybe 7 or 8 minutes, except for my legs and the back of my neck. Those lasted close to 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not a lasting solution, but it could be enough just to bring you just a few minutes of relief, maybe in the middle of a long race, or if you're going to use it for a short distance like a 5K or something like that, and you can use that to just kind of keep you somewhat cooled off, or at least thinking that you're cooled off while you go a short distance. So there you go, results from the Vapo Rub. I think it's time to try another experiment. So another day, another experiment. And today we are going to experiment with the cooling properties of peppermint tea. Now, peppermint is a natural source of menthol, and so we're going to use this. This is an herbal caffeine-free tea, and what I have done is I have brewed this and then let it sit to chill overnight in the refrigerator. So I've got my tea here. Now, during the first round, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of this in my mouth and swish it. So we're just going to get the menthol inside the mouth and see if that has any properties while I am doing a mile. Then I'm going to come back, loop around, and we're going to actually take a couple of good gulps of this and see if it works any differently once I have it just on the inside of my system. So let's get started. All right, I have the menthol in my mouth. Let's run. Okay, so with it just swishing around in my mouth, felt pretty much just like chewing a piece of mint gum, and the effects wore off after about, I'd say 8 minutes or so, 10 minutes at the most. So not a whole lot, and making me feel a little bit cooler. We're about to loop back around, and we're gonna actually take a drink and see if that makes a difference. Okay, now we'll see how that translates to this next mile. Here we go. Okay, so having finished another mile this time, drinking the peppermint tea, I would say, I don't know, it felt kind of cool and tingly. I'd say the effect lasted maybe 5 minutes. You get the same effect by drinking some really cold ice water, you would get pretty much the same effects. So, looking at how well it works overall, I would think if you were going to actually use this over the course of a race, you would probably need to bring the tea in a flask with you so that you can continually sip, because the effects do not last very long. And you would probably have to go back and forth between rinse and spit, which seem to last a little longer, and actually drinking it, which gives you more of an internal cooling. So there you go, my thoughts on peppermint tea. I think it's time to try another experiment. All right, it is time for another experiment, and this time we are going with mouthwash. Now, this is going to work in a similar way to the peppermint tea, in that we are going to obviously swish and spit. And the idea is that this is going to be a stronger dosage of menthol, and also it's made to stick around in your mouth longer than peppermint tea will. So we're going to see if this makes any kind of a difference. So we're just going to do this real quick and head out on a run. And bottoms up. Ooh, that is intense. Now let's see how this translates to keeping me cool on a run. Okay, so let's take a sip of ice water to see if we can reactivate. Just a little bit. We're going to rinse and spit again, see if we get the same results. Okay, ooh, that is strong. Let's run, see if we get the same results as last time. Okay, now, while I cool down, let's talk about how that went. So, I replicated it twice just to make sure that I was getting the same experience every time, which I did. Now, you get that really intense tingle at the beginning, just because, you know, that's what mouthwash typically does. And that wears off fairly quickly. But I kept an eye on my watch to make sure that I noted when I stopped feeling any kind of an effect. And I will say that if you breathe with your mouth closed, this doesn't really do much. But if you're like me and you breathe with your mouth open, I'm just used to that because I'm so used to having sinus problems. So I typically run breathing through my mouth, and that does kind of make you feel like you're getting a nice cooling breath. So there is that, but not a whole lot of cooling effect overall. Like I said, it just gives you that cool breath feeling. It was reactivated both times when I stopped to get a drink of ice water, but that was short-lived as well. The overall effect both times lasted around 11 minutes, which is definitely significantly longer than the peppermint tea did. So there is that. And then you get a nice reactivation if you take a drink of ice water, and that reactivates it for about another 2 minutes. But beyond that, not much effect. So not an overall cooling effect. It does last a while though, but about the only way that you could keep that going is if you had a travel size bottle of mouthwash like I had, and you stuck it in your pocket or pack, and you did that fairly often. So beyond the benefit of actually having minty fresh breath at the finish line, this is not one that I would probably try again. We'll be back again tomorrow with another experiment. It's time for another experiment, and this time we are using menthol cough drops. Now what I've done is I've done something similar to the peppermint tea in that I have dissolved some cough drops in some warm water, chilled it overnight, and I have now put it over ice. We're going to do a similar experiment in which we get this in my mouth. I'm going to rinse and spit, and we're going to see how we do over the course of a run. So, okay, a little bit of menthol in my mouth. Let's give this a shot. Okay, so at the end of this first mile, I would say that that effect lasted roughly 5 minutes at best. So we're gonna loop back around. This time we're gonna try drinking it and see if that makes any kind of a difference. So here we go. Okay, loop back around. This time we're gonna try drinking some. It's not the most pleasant taste, but I mean, I don't hate it, so. Okay, so let's see how that does. Okay, that time, the effect, you could definitely feel it more on the inside, but it only lasted about between 5 and 6 minutes. So, we're gonna loop back around and try one last thing. Here we go, okay? For this last round, I'm just going to use a cough drop by itself. This is something I've done many times before. If I have gone running with a sore throat, I will suck on a cough drop while I am out. We're gonna see if it has any cooling properties if I use the menthol and just the cough drop. Here we go. Okay, let's do a cool down, talk about how that went. Okay, so obviously those cough drops are meant to stick around a while. So the cough drop itself is going to last you around 10 minutes, varying depending on how fast your mouth dissolves the cough drop. And then the after effects of the cough drop, once it's gone, last about another 5 to 10 minutes. So you don't get an overall cooling effect, but it's kind of like with some of the other things we've tried, in that it is going to cool your breath as it goes in and out of your mouth. So that does give you a rather refreshing feeling, and you can easily trick yourself into thinking that you're cooler just based on that. So looking at the dissolved cough drop, I would say it was not hugely effective. For those keeping track, that was roughly 12 ounces of water, and I did 1 cough drop per 4 ounces. So you could potentially dissolve more than that to make it stronger, but I don't see why you would, when you could just as easily make some peppermint tea or use mouthwash to get a better effect. Even then, the effects don't last all that long. I guess it would depend on how long you are planning to run. The cough drop by itself was a lot more effective. That is one that you could potentially use. However, you would need to be really careful, because if you are not the type of person that can run with something in their mouth, eat and run at the same time, you run the risk of swallowing or breathing it in. So you got to know yourself and whether you're going to be able to run with a cough drop in your mouth. So looks like the cough drop by itself was the most effective of these 3. Let's move on to another experiment. So today we are going to do another experiment that they used, and that was cooling down with a slushie. So I just went with the classic caffeine-free cherry flavor, and the idea is that we are going to cool ourselves from the inside first and then see how long we can carry that out on a run. So let me see how much of this I can drink, and then we'll get started. Oh, brain freeze. Oh man. Okay, so I drank the whole thing. I gave myself brain freeze twice, and I feel like my tongue is frozen. So let's go for a run, see how we feel. Okay, whew, let's cool down a little. So, drank the whole thing, and I will say it did cool my insides, kind of bring my overall temperature down. I'd say I kind of felt that effect for generally about 12 to 14 minutes. So that's the longest lasting one that we have had so far. But then after that, it pretty much wears off, and then you have to slowly acclimatize yourself to the heat again. So maybe a good idea for just running a mile, Might be a good idea for if you're going to do a 5K or a short run. Or I could definitely see you using this if you are running an ultra, have someone on your crew meet you at an aid station, probably with one of the Coca-Cola slushies. So that way you get your sugar, you get your caffeine, and you get to cool down for a little bit. Of course, the obvious drawback is going to be that these things are going to melt really quickly if the weather is hot. So it's something that you would have to drink fairly quickly at the beginning of your run, and then that would be it. So there you go. That's a look at using a slushie to cool down your body temperature. Let's take it back inside. So there you go. What can we conclude from these experiments? Well, I think the overlying thing is that these are only short-term fixes. And really, the only way to deal with the heat is going to be with, first of all, making sure that you stay hydrated. That is incredibly important. And second of all, making sure that you know where your limits are. Know when to push, when not to push, and when to stop before you start suffering any type of effects of heat illness or heat stroke. So there you go. Did you find this informative or entertaining? Why don't you let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you want to send any other links my way that you would like me to experiment with and try out, you can contact me on any of my social media. The links are going to be down in the description. And you can find me across all platforms under the name Running Geek Girl. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you a thing. Just click the button down below and it keeps you up to date on all the running information I have coming out all the time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you could join me today. Remember to laugh hard, run fast, and be kind. I'll see you later.